I am Anya Vance. I knew something was off when they moved me out of the war room and into the burn room. My old desk was right by the founder's glass-walled office, soaking in the natural light that poured in over the San Francisco Bay. Now my desk sits right next to the Keurig coffee machine, where the smell of burnt plastic and stale coffee hovers like a constant reminder that anything valuable can be ruined. They called this administrative pool logistics. That's how they packaged a seasoned operations specialist with 9 years of experience and demoted me to a glorified errand runner, all to clear the runway for Damien Hale, the new VP of Strategic Growth. Damien was currently standing in the conference room, laser pointing at a chart whose data accuracy I had verified 10 times, declaring loudly, "We need to optimize core capabilities." Just then, the noisy HP printer behind me spat out an old compliance report from 2021. I glanced at the text on my screen. Damien had just mispronounced the name of the risk-scoring algorithm, the very algorithm I had spent a month translating from code draft into legal language for patent submission. I took a slow sip of the lukewarm coffee. I had been erased, but they forgot that even a ghost can see. And if a billion-dollar fintech company was built on my invisibility, I would be the one who decided when it was time for me to reappear. The nature of my job never had a fancy title. 8 years ago, when Julian Cole and 3 engineers were trying to bootstrap Ether Analytics out of a cramped co-working space, I was hired to help manage. That meant filing expenses. Yes, but more importantly, it meant I was the only person capable of switching between multiple languages. I was the interpreter between vision and execution, between marketing and dev, and most critically between engineering and legal. An engineer would say, "We figured out how to compress dirty data input without losing statistical accuracy." I would write, "The adaptive data compression module for nonlinear statistical inputs is herein claimed." That was the formula I used to draft watertight patent claims for the USPTO. I never asked for the title of co-founder or even head of IP. I preferred the shadows. There is a terrifying power in being the only one who holds the original documentation and understands its lexicon. Our legal team at this time insisted on putting my name on the most critical patent filings as a co-inventor, simply to create a cleaner paper trail for future proofing. I agreed, prioritizing efficiency over fame. And then Damien Hale arrived, a younger man armed with an MBA and a religious belief in buzzwords like streamlining and vertical synergy. He didn't shake my hand. He gave a limp, 2-finger wave, treating me like the receptionist. Within 2 weeks, everything I had built began to unravel. I was removed from 3 essential Slack channels. My calendar went from back-to-back meetings to wide open. My title changed in the system from operations liaison to administrative pool logistics. I wasn't fired because that would have triggered a costly legal review. Instead, I was politely erased, shoved into the darkened corner next to the printer. The hardest part was not the demotion, but the silence. Julian Cole, the founder who used to call me the company's connective tissue, who would email me late at night, now actively avoided eye contact. My usefulness had expired the moment I crossed 49 and started wearing readers. I didn't cry, I just sat and watched. Because I knew that once a building looks finished, people quickly forget the scaffolding that held it up. I was instructed to train Chloe Lynn, a fresh-faced 26-year-old who was now taking over my old responsibilities under the shiny new title of Product Systems Liaison. Chloe had a new badge and a gleaming laptop, but she couldn't submit a simple compliance filing without consulting Google. I spent hours teaching Chloe how to navigate the legacy patent database, a system I had engineered to use outdated access tokens. She frowned at the screen. "Wow, this is more complicated than I expected," she said, her initial swagger melting away. I offered a small, tired smile. "It tends to be," I replied, my voice perfectly neutral, "when you're the one who wrote the damn thing." She didn't catch the sarcasm. None of them did. They assumed legal systems and operational workflows just materialized from some off-the-shelf SaaS product. Meanwhile, I sat at my old desk and watched. I saw them forwarding my old legal files to interns. I saw Chloe fumble with version control like a toddler with a chainsaw, breaking protocols I had spent years building. I said nothing. They wanted the work without the woman. They wanted the system without the architect. I was too experienced to fire, but too quiet to promote. So I sat, I watched, and I listened. And I started printing. Not out of malice, but as an act of precaution. Every time an old email thread about a patent amendment or a firmware approval draft popped up, I quietly printed it out. I didn't alter a single date or signature. I simply archived like a historian documenting how an empire forgot who laid the first bricks. I stored them in boxes beneath my desk, labeling them by feeling. This is when they needed me. This is when they stopped. This is when I knew I was gone. I had been the invisible backbone of this company. and I knew exactly how close that backbone was to a complete fracture. The rumors of the billion-dollar acquisition spread like wildfire through the office. Omnicorp, a monolithic fintech corporation replacing Tectomy, was circling Ether Analytics. Everyone started preening, updating LinkedIn profiles and trading sneakers for loafers. I maintained my deadly calm. I had seen windfalls fall apart faster than a three-legged IKEA table. Amidst the growing frenzy, I received a simple email. It wasn't from Damien, Julian, or Chloe. It came from Vera Thorne replacing Tecto legal-led counsel for Omnicorp, working on the due diligence team. Subject line patent, US 20XX, verification request. The body was 2 lines of polite corporate language asking if I would be willing to verify my contribution to a specific patent filing from 5 years ago. It was the patent covering our core risk-scoring algorithm replacing haptic sensor module. I stared at the email. No one had asked me anything real in weeks. I felt the urge to hit delete to let the silence continue. But then I thought of Damien sneering about legacy documentation bloat, and Chloe, who once asked if co-inventor was a ceremonial title. I didn't delete it. I replied briefly professionally and attached my original annotated notes explaining exactly how I had solved a key technical issue by adjusting the legal claim language. And I signed it, Anya Vance co-inventor, replacing Elizabeth Jean Warren. 2 days later, Vera Thorne replied. Her tone had shifted less canned, more curious and suspicious. She had cross-referenced my signature against other filings. Seemed I was listed on quite a few. Her email contained a direct question. Cross-reference indicates you are tied to 11 other key valuation filings, including core optimization logic. Could you explain why this is not reflected in your current title or equity package? I didn't answer that question. I knew it wasn't really for me. It was for Julian and Damien. They had opened the filing cabinet and the ghosts were walking. I had been relegated to admin pool, a logistics coordinator. But paper doesn't lie. And once the lawyers get curious, there's no hiding what's been buried. The office environment quickly devolved into a pressurized silence. I could hear Damien Hale starting to use words like oversight and clerical error during hushed, unscheduled calls. Then the binder showed up. Thick, ugly, and labeled preliminary IP ledger, internal review only. Though I didn't see it, I heard the whispers. A junior counsel at Omnicorp had hit a recursion loop during the vetting process. The name Anya Vance replacing Elizabeth J. Warren kept surfacing not once, not twice, but 47 times across core filings. Patents covering our core algorithm, the compliance engine, the machine learning modules, the IP binder, was effectively my professional biography. Omnicorp didn't like it. Big money never does. They demand clean lines and authority maps. Instead, they found a phantom with fingerprints all over the product and crucially no contract stating I didn't own a damn thing. I continued sorting old compliance memos near the Keurig machine. Mid-afternoon, Chloe Lynn approached my desk. She had the look of someone handed a live grenade labeled mentorship opportunity. Ms. Anya, her voice was thin and shaky. There seems to be some confusion about co-authorship. Your name is on a lot of filings. I didn't look up. I continued sorting the stack of compliance memos. That's what happens when you write them. I said, my voice calm and measured as if I were explaining how to clear a paper jam. Chloe blinked. You really wrote them? I just nodded. Every word that wasn't in code. Damien Hale was trying damage control. I could hear him through the conference room wall. She's just admin, he said. Probably a legacy filing issue. We'll clean it up. Just admin. In that moment, my silence stopped being passive. It became armor. I didn't need to storm into meetings or bang my fist on a table. I just needed to wait. Because I knew the binder wasn't the end. It was the door that had cracked open, and the lawyers wanted real answers, not from a VP with shoe-polish charm, but from the woman whose name had started showing up where it mattered most on the intellectual spine of the company they were about to pay $1 billion for. They summoned me like a hostile witness. No polite warning, just a knock on my cubicle wall from HR. They need you upstairs now. I took the stairs, not the elevator. I needed the quiet, the methodical walk to ensure my composure. When I walked into the small conference room, Damien was pacing. Chloe sat beside him like a nervous shadow. Julian Cole, the founder, was at the table. No one offered me a seat. Damien launched in immediately. Hey, Anya, he said, forcing a smile. We just need to clear something up real quick. Looks like a clerical issue on some of the filings. We're going to submit a clarification packet, just something formal that says you were support, not a contributor. Standard stuff. He slid the paper toward me. That's when I reached into my bag. No theatrics, just the soft slide of a paper on the laminate. It was a certified printed copy of the original filing for the haptic sensor module, the one that started this avalanche. It bore my signature, and the former CTO's. Co-inventor acknowledgement was stamped unambiguously in black ink. "You're listed as co-inventor," legal mumbled. "Because I am," I said. The room felt suddenly smaller. Damien tried a weak chuckle. "Yeah, but look, it's a gray area, right? Contributions don't always equal ownership." "You used me," I cut in. "You used my work, you used my knowledge, you used my silence." Chloe blinked hard. "I didn't ask for my name to be there," I continued. "But your legal team put it there because it was cleaner than fighting for the rights after the fact. They knew I authored the language." The lawyer for Ether cleared his throat. "We need to pause here." Everyone turned to him. "We've received a formal request from Omnicorp's legal counsel. They're asking for clarification on Miss Warren's role title history and compensation package. They've also requested documentation on patent vesting agreements. Until that's resolved, they're pausing IP diligence review." Damien's mouth opened, then closed. Julian sat still. I folded my hands. I was not angry. I was precise. "You want me to disclaim authorship," I said. "What you should be doing is checking the valuation model, because if they're smart, and they are, they've already redlined your numbers based on the assumption that I am the only one who actually understands what you're selling." The silence was thick enough to choke on. I stood to leave. "Just let me know when you need the other 46 filings verified," I said simply. As I reached the door, I heard Julian's lawyer whisper, "You didn't have her under contract." And in that moment, I felt nothing but cold clarity. When someone tries to erase you after you've helped build an empire, they don't just risk embarrassment, they risk exposure. The next 48 hours were a masterclass in corporate collapse. Slack channels went dark. HR's tone turned sugary sweet. Damien Hale disappeared entirely. No one said he was fired, but when his company laptop vanished from the IT shelf, everyone knew the guillotine had whispered, "Shh, thunk." Omnicorp formally paused the acquisition. Julian Cole, the founder, hadn't emailed me in months, but now he sent an unstyled 2-sentence email, subject line boardroom now. He met me at the door himself. "Elizabeth," he said, "we need to talk inside." In the middle of the boardroom, the godforsaken binder sat open like a wound. A sticky note on top read, 47 filings named Inventor EJW. They didn't offer me a chair, so I pulled one for myself. Legal started. "Confirmed the documents," he said. "They're valid. The U.S. records back them up. Elizabeth, you're not just listed. You're the named contributor in more than half of them." The buyer flagged this as a significant exposure point. Julian turned to me. "Why didn't you say anything?" I shrugged. "You didn't ask?" Damien Hale finally slithered in. "Elizabeth, this is obviously a misunderstanding. We're just trying to keep the narrative clear for the buyer. It's not personal." I looked at him and said, "If it were personal, you'd be thanking me for not leaking the fact that your equity prospectus is built on intellectual property you tried to bury in a cubicle." HR jumped in. "We feel confident we can make this right. Retroactive acknowledgement. Maybe a spot bonus." "No." Legal interrupted. "It's not that simple. She's not just owed acknowledgement, based on the filings, the contribution language, and the lack of work for hire agreements for that period. She owns part of it." The founder went pale. "The patents." Legal nodded slowly. "We didn't lock them down properly, not all of them." The acquisition clock had stopped ticking. Omnicorp had sent one line, "We will resume diligence once ownership rights are verified by the named inventor." That's what they called me now. Not admin support, named inventor. I sat back, crossed my legs, and said, "Well, it's not clean, is it?" Julian raised a hand to silence Damien. "Don't," he said. The board called an emergency session. Julian Cole emerged 2 hours later looking 10 years older. He didn't make eye contact when he approached my desk. "Anya," he said, "we'd like you to rejoin the leadership team, effective immediately." I waited a beat, then replied, "What's the title?" He hesitated, then said, "Chief Innovation Officer." I nodded. He already had the paperwork printed. Damien Hale's name was already being erased from the internal directory. Chloe Lynn was reassigned to documentation support. At noon, I entered the boardroom again. I took the seat at the head of the IP review table. The buyer's CEO was there now. He looked at Julian briefly and turned to me with a nod. "You're the one we came for." I opened the binder. My binder. "Shall we begin?" I asked. And no one said a word. Real power doesn't arrive with sound. It arrives with silence. And silence, when held long enough, becomes gravity. I never raised my voice. I never leaked a file. I just documented, witnessed, and filed. And when the time came, I let the paperwork speak. Silence isn't surrender. It's a strategy.